Hi, I'm Jacob Oller. I'm the movies editor at Paste Magazine. We're here at South by Southwest 2024 at the Jezebel and Paste Magazine Interview House. I am here with David Altrogge, director of Clemente, the documentary about legendary ball player Roberto Clemente. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
Thank
How are
you
you?
so much for coming in. I'm great because I get to tell everybody about your movie. So
Awesome.
That's a huge plus for me. You have come from a background of, I would say, an omnivorous documentary plate. Can you tell me about how you found Roberto's story, how this film came together?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town right outside of Pittsburgh called Indiana, Pennsylvania. And so, of course, the Pirates are in the air. Roberto Clemente in the air, but I was always bad at baseball. I was terrible at baseball. And in small towns, you got to find your own thing. So I sort of found films, but had always sort of been aware of Clemente. And in 2018, I was wrapping up a film and kind of just trying to think through what would be maybe my next film. And I just wanted to do something that gave people hope. Obviously, it's just been bleak and dark. I mean, for a long time, but I was just, I guess, maybe growing up, becoming more and more aware as I got older and having kids of just how dark things were in the world. And so I started thinking of what are stories of people who did good, of people whose lives mattered and really show you can do good with your life. And so I remembered all I knew about Clemente was that he died helping people. That's sort of the thing that I knew. So I read some books and then started seeing these just moments of just incredible kindness to very, very private moments too that I thought was really cool. They weren't publicized moments. They weren't. He wasn't doing it for publicity. He was doing it to just be kind to people and give people something. And so it kind of went from there.
Yeah. Do you remember the books that you read? So you were like, I'm going down to the library. I'm getting my stack.
Yeah. I'll tell you the best book, and it was the first book I read, and it just wrecked me. Was David Moranis' book Clemente. So David Moranis, Pulitzer Prize winning author, and I read that book, and there's one story, and it's in the film about this fan that Clemente met, and he was signing her autograph, and he missed the bus, and so she and her dad gave him a ride to the airport and became best friends. And that story was that, and one other story where when I read those, I was like, all right, I got to find a way to do this film.
It's so cool. Well, because in the documentary you see not only these interview subjects who are like, yeah, we just ran into him and he was an all-star and he came to our house for dinner.
Yeah.
You see the piece of paper where he left his phone number.
Right.
Where he's like, hey, just give me a call. You seem cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing imagining A-Rod.
Yeah, right.
Or somebody just leaving their phone number and being like, if you ever want to hang out,
drop
me a line.
Well, and I think that was one of the things that, again, there's so much about Roberto Clemente that just is so sort of counter to everything we think of when we think of celebrity culture, and just that he was he wanted to hang out with real people. He was not into celebrities. He was not into being a celebrity except for that he just wanted to be recognized for his talents. He didn't want he was I'll have a farm in Puerto Rico and I'll go hang out with my family in the off season. I'm not gonna go live in New York during the off season or Los Angeles. It's I'm gonna be with my family and real people in Pittsburgh, and so it's just so cool.
Well, you really get that thread across all the way through the movie because you see him plucked from obscurity.
Yeah.
You just see the very beginnings of baseball scouting culture, find him and is like, that kid looks good.
Yeah, right.
And then he, for the rest of his career, is basically saying, I'm sticking up for the little guy, I'm sticking up for the working man, I'm sticking up for Puerto Ricans, I'm sticking up for Spanish speakers.
Yeah.
And the charity work, the representation, that all goes hand in hand with this sort of working man ethos that you find.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the biggest things I learned in making the film, and getting to know his sons, and that getting to make the film with them. They're executive producers, Roberto Jr., Luis, and Enrique, and just I knew those things from the book, but then when you sit down and you talk to Roberto Jr. and he's telling you stuff we couldn't even include in the film, just because so much stuff of just this, I don't know, just this he was going to prove himself. He knew his value, but also he was also going to be sticking up for the little guy. He knew how hard he had to work to get the respect that he felt like he deserved, and he never even really got it in his lifetime. And so he's like, I'm going to make it easier for people coming after me.
Yeah. How did that process go, approaching the family?
Yeah, so initially approached. There's an amazing museum in Pittsburgh, and if you're ever in Pittsburgh, you should go. It's called the Roberto Clemente Museum, and it's just a guy named Dwayne Reeder, who's an executive producer in our film. He's just like amassed this beautiful collection of photographs and memorabilia and everything, and it's like a sanctuary, a church, a monument to Clemente. It's gorgeous. So I first approached him about it, and sort of like we started talking. We talked for about a year to sort of, and he's like, okay, I think, and then he introduced me to the family because he works very closely with the family. And then I spent another year or so getting to know the family and just sort of like, because I think that they'd been approached a lot over the years, and so I think they were a little reluctant. I spent about a year just getting to know them and them trying to make sure they felt comfortable with what kind of how I wanted to do it. And I think what really sort of where we connected was I didn't want to make a film just about the baseball.
Yeah.
And I think they were really excited about that. I think they wanted a film about who he was off the field.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean that's so much of his legacy. Like his life cut short.
Yeah.
So young, and not only the family he left behind, but the charity work he left behind. The huge breaking of the color barrier and laying the playing field, for lack of a better word, wide open for Latin American baseball players to just flood the market. And they all owe something, as many do who talk in your documentary, they all owe something to Roberto Clemente.
Yeah.
So do you think it was you emphasizing your interest in Clemente the man rather than being like a stats head, a baseball geek?
Yeah. I think so. And I'm not like I'm not like a huge baseball guy, and I was terrible at baseball as a kid. I love what baseball sort of represents more broadly to the American story and to the American history. But yeah, I think when I was able to sort of talk to them about like I'm really more interested in those quiet moments, in the moments with the fans, in the moments with you, with him as a father. Like those were the things that I was really interested in. And then the baseball, there's great baseball scenes. But those are more like just the fun and excitement. Right. But the heart of the movie is off the field. I really wanted, and I think the family was excited, and Roberto Jr. and Luis and Enrique were excited because like I wanted to make a film that non-baseball fans like are going to want to watch just as much as baseball fans.
Oh yeah, well I'm unfortunately not a baseball guy. So I came to this and I was like, I don't know anything about Clemente. I would love to learn about Clemente. And then I got so much more than I bargained for, because I think your film is coming out in a climate with the league, about the Negro Leagues. Just came out last year on, I think it's on Hulu, but it is a fantastic documentary, really thorough history, but you lose something in its insularity. Like it is really speaking to people who know baseball. Yeah. And your film is speaking to people who know American culture.
Oh, cool.
Right. And so they interact with each other in a great way, and you get a good sense of baseball history and how that goes hand in hand with American history. And then your talking heads get both. Yeah. Like you have some very interesting people come in and get to talk about both what Clemente means for Puerto Rican Americans, or Puerto Ricans, excuse me, and what he means to people from Pittsburgh who love baseball. You have Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Oh, can you talk to me a little bit about how you got him involved?
From Puerto Rican, so I'll pretend
Sure.
Yeah. Great.
I'm Puerto Ricans. And you have talking heads, great talking heads, who...
Sorry, one more time. Do the exact same thing.
Okay.
I'm now set up for that.
Perfect. And what it means for Puerto Ricans. And you have some great talking heads who talk about both sides of that, both the baseball and what he means to culture at large. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got Michael Keaton, Rita Moreno, and Richard Linklater involved?
Yeah. I mean, in all, it's funny. It was so it is cool, and that's one of the things that I was most excited about. Is like we got to bring together this really interesting mix of people who don't often share the screen in a documentary. So like you said, we have Bob Costas because he's baseball, but then there's like Tom Morello, and then there's like and he's sharing the screen with Rita Moreno, and she's sharing the screen with, like you said, Michael Keaton and Richard Linklater. And I mean, what really initially happened was, so Richard Linklater is one of the executive producers of the film, and I was connected to him through a producer named Mike Blizzard, incredible producer who produces Rick's films, but also produced a documentary about one of Clemente's teammates called No No.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that premiered at Sundance in 2014.
Great movie.
So a mutual friend was like, you got to talk to my buddy Mike. He's great. So I talked to Mike, and he started helping me with all these things, like just from a producing side, like, and he wasn't even a producer yet. He's just like, oh, you got to talk to this person. You got to talk to this person. And then he's like, my buddy, a good friend of mine, Rick, has a great Clemente story. And I was like, Rick. And then at some point in the conversation, I realized, like, oh, no, he's talking about Richard Linklater. So we did an interview with Richard Linklater, and then he was just so generous. Him and Mike were so generous, and they're like, we love the Clemente story, and we want to help in any way we can. Wow. And so Richard agreed to come on as an executive producer. Mike came on as a producer. And then once they were on board, it became really easy to just reach out to, Michael Keaton's people. Right. And then and they were eager to talk. I mean, they were all great, but it was like a little bit of a barrier removed.
You got to get the doors open.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, so this is like a real documentary. It's not it's not like. So once they were involved, it wasn't that hard. And of course, like Michael Keaton is like, he was super pumped to do it because he loves Clemente and he loves the Pirates. Rita Moreno, she was like, oh my God, like Puerto Rico, and like I want to lift up and help get Roberto's story out because of what he represents to Puerto Rican culture. And then, all of them are great. So
I do. Okay, so did your lack of baseball knowledge have you feeling a little shy around these people coming in who are like geeks, full geeks?
You know what? At times, yes. At times, I shouldn't say these things, but like Francisco Lindor's in our film, and he is a superstar. I didn't know who he was until like a week before we interviewed him, and one of our producers is like, hey, I got Francisco Lindor. And I was like, I'm sorry, who's Francisco? And he's like, dude, you better never say that again. And Francisco Lindor's huge. I'm just so out of touch with like current baseball. So in that regard, yes. But I learned quickly. Honestly, I think it helps me because I was able to sort of have my sort of perspective as a documentary filmmaker is as conducting the interview, I want to represent the audience. So if I don't understand it, as a generally non-baseball guy, so how can you help me understand that? Right. Help me break it down into like.
It's better they didn't give you a bunch of cards to study beforehand.
Yeah. I think So again, I had a general knowledge of obviously Clemente's life, and then when I would talk to certain players, I'd try to have a general sense of the games and who won the games, and those things. But I was really like, tell me about Game 7 of the World Series, and then they'd start going into it, and
then they have to make it exciting for you. It's like approaching someone at a bar and finding out what they care about, and then being like, well, tell me your version of it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like we're not making this for like, and I think it also helps, and I'm sure you've experienced this as an interviewer. It helps, I think, to just not be a total fanboy, because like it gives me a little objectivity. So I'm meeting these like legends, and they are legends, but because I'm not a baseball guy, it helps me just sort of like be able to focus more on the story and not be caught up in the celebrity of some of these people who are huge celebrities.
The legends don't want to be treated like legends.
Yeah, and they are. I mean, Yadi Molina is obviously a god, and Francisco Lindor, he's a god, and like all these people, but it helps that I can just sort of helps me focus on the story.
Now, hearing that you're not a baseball guy and that you were kind of learning on the fly a little bit.
Yes.
It does make the scenes where you are clipping together some of these humongous plays and humongous games all the more impressive. What was your editing process like?
Well, I'll tell you, I had an incredible editor named Chent, and an incredible co-writer and story producer named Elise Andert. And Elise is a huge baseball head. She lives in St. Louis. She lost her mind when Yachty and the Molina brothers came on. And Chent is a huge sports guy. He's more of a basketball guy, but he gets. So they were able to because I would they were able to really keep me honest about the sports, and if these just making sure that we were so that for baseball people, we don't want them to be like, this is not right here. So they were able to really keep me honest. And then of course Richard Linklater, huge baseball nerd, and Mike Blizzard, huge. So a lot of baseball baseball heads on the project to keep me on track.
Yeah, your team was baseball focused, right?
Very baseball focused.
I was gonna say I've seen Linklater's baseball documentary about the college coach from the University of Texas, Austin, UT. And so I imagine he wouldn't want to be puppet master, but he definitely had some opinions.
And he it's funny you mention that, because there's a scene in the film, and he called out where we got something wrong with the way we cut the footage together, and he's like, doesn't really make sense with what they're talking about. And it's like, thank you for
You're
watching.
like, I
the
never
film.
would have
Yeah.
gotten
No,
that.
I know.
He's like,
'cause I
he
was
said bunt. That's not a bunt.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, bunt?
It cuts well. It looks great. What are you talking about? So it was really helpful to have that kind of expertise.
I would also say the score is fantastic.
Right on.
The score is really good.
Oh, man, I'm so
score is really good.
glad you like the score. Yeah, I was super pumped to work with these guys, Marcus and Mark. They're from New York. I came across Marcus's work. He scored a podcast called Conviction: The Satanic Panic, and I had just heard it.
Yeah.
I love the podcast, and then I heard his score, and I was like, this score is sick. And I had wanted to work with him for years, and so when I had this project, I just like emailed him cold and was like, hey, you want to like do a project together? And then he and his team blew me away with what they did.
I mean, it really adds to the energy. Like a sports doc, especially with a very singular focus,
Yeah.
it can drag. You know,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, I get the sense of this, but it's jazzy. It's got
Yeah,
energy.
yeah.
Then that's as much the cutting as it is the music,
Yeah,
as
right.
it is the pacing. So
Well, and we wanted it to feel current. We didn't want, and of course you want it to feel current, but we just didn't want it to feel, we wanted to sort of strike the balance of like, it's got to be timeless so that like next year it's not going to feel super dated. But it also, we don't want it to feel like fuddy-duddy and boring. Like we're so trying to make it feel timeless, but also have that current energy and also true to the period.
yeah, and I think you succeed.
Cool.
What is the Roberto Clemente story you want to tell that people don't know?
A specific moment
An
in the film,
anecdote.
an anecdote. Yeah, I mean, I think the story I'd want to tell is there's this great story, and it's in the film, and it's one of my absolute favorite moments. There's this kid, Harry Hayden, comes from a real Pittsburgh working class family. He's lived near Three Rivers Stadium, which is no longer there, but it's where the Pirates played, and just obsessed with the Pirates. One day he's out after a game. He had gone to the game, and then he goes home, and he's throwing his rubber ball against the wall of his house, and just throwing it. And all of a sudden he hears this car coming down the road, and he looks, and it's this green Eldorado, and he knows that's Clemente's car because the players are always driving by his house. So he sees Clemente driving down, and he waves, Clemente beeps, but then the car pulls over, and Harry's like, what's happening here? And Clemente gets out, and he's like, all right, let's see what you got, man. And they start playing catch. After Clemente had worked all day, playing a game, he sees this kid, and he stops. They play catch, and then Harry's mom is like, hey, oh my God, Roberto, you're Harry's favorite. Come on in for some dinner. I just made this dinner. We got some hamburgers and crinkle cut fries and iced tea. Come on in. So she drags him in the house, and he goes in and he sits and he eats a meal with them. And again, these are just normal Pittsburghers. They're and he takes time when I don't know, he had worked all day. I'd be like, I got to get home to the kids. I got to get home to, or whatever, to go hang out.
I just played baseball for so long.
The last thing I want to do is go play catch with this little kid. But so that's that moment of kindness and that moment of seeing someone that, I don't know, I feel like most of us would just drive by and that's the story I want people to know about.
You see the
Roberto.
seeds that he planted that are still that have grown and are still lasting in these people today. Because I think, if I'm remembering that story correctly, he's also talking about his dad, and he's like, I think my dad's like a tough dude, like a sports guy.
Yeah,
like a badass.
Harry's saying that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so he's like, that time where Roberto just stopped and played catch with me, it's like the first time I can remember my dad being impressed with me. And you're just like, oh my God, because this guy's in his 50s, 60s now.
Yeah.
This is a long time ago, and he's still holding that memory. And it's, you're like, oh, this is why people like sports.
It's really,
totally.
it's really special, man. It's really, and then, I think just to get to know his sons and just to get to know specifically Luis and Roberto, the two I got to know the best. And it's man, they've been carrying on their dad's legacy since he died, and his wife Vera, we got to do the last interview with her before she passed away, and we wouldn't be talking about Roberto Clemente today in the same way we do if it weren't for Vera and the way she just fought so hard for people to remember Roberto and to make sure that people didn't forget his life and what he stood for. And now his sons carrying on that legacy, continuing to do the work, continuing to just carry on their father's work, and then 50 plus years after he died. And so that's, I'm so excited for people to get to hear their story, the story of their father through them telling it, and it's just really special.
Well, that's what this film is doing, is continuing that legacy, and it is a real door opener to people who either love baseball and don't know, or don't know anything about baseball and just want to know about somebody important.
Yeah.
Or people who love baseball and know and want to see some great stuff about Roberto
That's awesome.
Clemente.
That's
Again,
awesome.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.